Hello friends! So last week I showed how you can animate the arm separately using the plastic tool, but still drawn on the same level. So you can get the benefits of cutout animation, but without having to build a cutout rig using multiple levels and the schematic view. And this is ideal for quickly adding movement, and is what I need for working on this Futurama project. And a while back in an earlier video, I showed how you can animate a crease in a bend in a cutout rig. But today I'd like to show you how you do so using the plastic tool. And this is with huge thanks to Behemoth, who showed me an example of how to do it on the Discord server. And there's a link to the Discord server in the description below. So after experimenting a little, I thought I'd share that and a few other plastic tool tips with you today. So if we take a look at Fry's arm as it is today, and if you have a look at the mesh, go to the plastic tool and then animate mode. The first thing I'll do is share a tip with you, and that's to hide the mesh. When you're not working with it, it's just visual clutter getting in the way. And all you need to do is right click on any of the nodes and untick the show mesh checkbox. So now you can work purely with the skeleton. So if I bend the arm at the wrist here, you see the arm bends as kind of a big plastic sausage, which isn't necessarily what you want. And at the elbow here, you've got this funny creasy bend thing. Now what I'd like to do today is make the crease in the elbow a bit more distinct, with one of the lines of the sleeve overlapping the other to make it look more realistic. And we could do that by cutting into the mesh. So if I bring the mesh back by reticking the show mesh checkbox, then if we go to the mode for the plastic tool and choose edit mesh, now what we need to do is to change these triangles so there's a gap in the middle where the elbow will be. And that's the equivalent of getting a piece of paper, cutting into it, and then bending the two pieces of paper one over the other so they overlap. And we do this by selecting on one of these joint lines between the triangles. Then you can right click and you choose between one of four options. And different options are shown depending on which edge is selected. So for instance, for this line here, if I select it first and then right click and choose swap edge, it'll change where the line is joined. Instead of being between these cornered points, it'll be crossways between those two cornered points. So you right click, swap edge, and you see it rotating around there. The second option is to collapse an edge, and that will remove this edge so that this point here is joined onto this point directly without having an edge between them. So we'll right click and choose collapse, and you see that shrink down. And then split edge adds an extra vertex, so it creates an extra point in the middle of these two triangles. So if I do that, and you see that split in the middle, so now it joins to the other 2 points as well. And that could be useful if you need more detail. And if I move to an edge near the side of the mesh and then right click, I'll get the option I'm using today, which is cut mesh. So what this does is it duplicates the edge and the joining points so that you can move them apart from each other to create yourself a gap in the mesh. And this is exactly what we need today. So what I'll do first is I'll select multiple of these edges by clicking on one, holding the control key, and then clicking on others nearby to create a bigger gap in the mesh. Now the bigger the gap, the more overlap you'll have, so you need to experiment a little and get a feel for how this works to work out how many edges to change. And then you just right click on any of those edges and choose cut mesh. So that's now duplicated those four edges, and you can see that by clicking on the points where they join and dragging it either up or down, and you'll see here where it's been duplicated. And again, I'll drag one down, one up, and the same for the third, and again for the fourth. So here you can see there's a nice gap in that mesh. Now if you leave a gap in the mesh, there'll be nothing drawn in that gap, so you'll have a big hole. And I'll just show you that by deleting all of these keys, so that when I go to the animate mode, the arm doesn't move. So you see here, there'll be a gap in the arm, and we don't want that. So what we need to do is actually place the points so that the edges are touching each other or slightly overlapping, so that there's some of the drawing in each of the meshes. and then go to the Animate view and you'll see the whole picture. And again, if I right click and hide the mesh, the image looks the same. So now what we need to do is add 2 more bones so that when you bend the arm, the notch we've created in the mesh will open and close. So we go to build a skeleton. Now bring this joint to the edge of the cut. So I want to add 1 bone directly above that cut and 1 bone from the wrist going up to the edge of the forearm cut. So now if we choose the Animate option, as we open the arm, the notch opens, and as we close it, there's some overlap as the forearm goes in front of the top of the arm. But one thing you probably noticed was the line of the forearm cut through part of the line of the top arm. So if I hide the mesh to make it clearer, and then animate the arm moving upwards, that looks fine there, but then here, the top part of the arm overlaps the bottom, and then there's a gap there where it gets confused as to what to draw and what should be in front of the other. And the way to fix this is to change the stacking order of the vertexes. It's really simple, you just click on one of the vertexes, here it's called vertex 10, and then at the top on the toolbar you've got the stacking order. All the vertexes start off at 0, and if you want one vertex to be in front of another, it needs to have a higher number. If you want it behind, you need to have a smaller number. So as all the other vertexes are 0, I just need to change this to 1. And then press enter. And now this set of triangles on the forearm will be drawn in front of the set of triangles on the upper arm. So as I animate that moving, you're only seeing the outline of the forearm. Now there is still the issue that there is a notch in the arm, so if you animate the arm too wide, you get to see the gap, but we'll take a look at that in a second. Okay, so if I just delete this key to reset the position of the arm, and then I'll attach it and we'll do some animation. But first, something that Dave pointed out is that some of the animation in Futurama tends to be shown on 2s. That is 1 movement every 2 frames. So before we add any keys, if we change the default animation step from 1 to 2, when we place any keys, the animation will only move every other frame, which will give us a more authentic look. So, if we just place the arm back on the shoulder, remember from last week we need to untick keep distance so we can move it closer. We'll place that on there. So tick that back again. And now we can start the animation. So we want the arm to sit in one position for a little while, until Fry's eyes open with surprise. So I select the first key, press Ctrl C to copy it, move to the new frame, and then Ctrl V to paste, so the arm doesn't move during that period. And then just before he talks, we want the arm to move. So we'll have it moving forward a little bit and bending at the elbow a little bit. And then towards the end of finishing talking, I want to keep that same key and then move it some more. So a little bit more forward and a little bit more bent. Bring that hand down. And then we can see the crease here. And again, I'll copy that key, place it down below, and then I want the arm to reset back to the first position. So I'll copy this first key down here. Good. That looks really nice. But if you don't keep copying keys around and you want to just place the arm, you'll come across an issue that I can help you solve. So I'll just delete this last key. So we want the arm to go from the bent position down to the straight position. And rather than copying keys, you might decide just to move it yourself by hand. But then if I zoom in, you'll notice you can see the notch that were cut out of the mesh. This is because the angle of that vertex has gone past 0 degrees to 15. So if I move it back slowly to where the line's joined, you'll see it's around 0. So if you want it resetting back, you can make sure the angle stays above 0 by a little bit, so the line joins, or you can type 0 in the angle box and the arm will be returned to where you first set it. Now there is a way to not worry about this, and that's by setting the angle bounds that a vertex can move between. And it's such a powerful and useful feature it's worth knowing about. So I've already got vertex 7 here selected, the one I'm moving around. You can see we're editing vertex 7 by seeing its name in the name box here. And over at the far right we've got these two boxes called angle bounds. And all you need to do is to put two numbers in there to state the angle that this vertex can move between. So for instance, if I put 0 in one and 45 in the other, and then press enter, as I start to move this vertex, you'll see this angle is shown from 0 to 45. You can only move that arm in that angle. Now I don't want that arm bending backwards on itself, because it won't look right and you'll see the notch in the elbow. And for some reason the angle works anti-clockwise, so this first position is 0 degrees and 45 degrees is this right hand position. So you want the right hand position to be 0, which is where the arm is now, so we'll change that to 0. And the left hand position it can move to, and if I set that to -90, just to see the outcome, and if I click and drag the arm, you'll now see the arm can move to the left, but only 90 degrees from where it started, and it can only move back to 0, so you can't reveal that notch. So 90 degrees, probably want to go a little bit further, so I'll change that to -120, and if I click and drag it can now move up here. So it means as you work on your animation you haven't got to worry about the arm moving too far. You can just click and drag to where you want it, and you won't reveal that notch in the mesh, nor will you bend your arm too far so it looks peculiar. Now you wouldn't set the angle bounds for every joint, but it's handy when you use this notch technique, and also to keep your character moving in a realistic way. So there we go, that's how you can add a crease into your animation using the plastic tool and a single drawing level, how to move your plastic tool within a set range, and hopefully you learned a few more tips along the way. So here's the final animation, and hopefully next week I'll be back starting work on organising the script into scenes, and I can start work drawing the backgrounds and putting this animation together. So next week will be more Futurama, and that's a guarantee.